You're not here by accident. This message found you for a reason. A note inspired by Carl Jung's teachings and something I came across in a Red Book archive that speaks about the human mind in a way most people will never understand. If you really listen to this till the end, the way you see your life will start to shift. So don't scroll away. Like this video, subscribe, and stay till the end. Because what you're about to hear might change the way you think about yourself forever. Now listen carefully. Become the person God can trust with success. There is a moment in every human life when silence becomes unbearable. Not the silence of the world, but the silence of your own mind when you are finally alone with it. No distractions, no applause, no excuses, no noise to hide behind. Only you and the truth that has been waiting patiently beneath everything you pretend to be. Carl Jung once pointed toward a terrifying idea hidden inside human psychology, that the life you are living is not fully chosen, it is largely inherited. A collection of fears you never questioned, beliefs you never examined, identities you never consciously selected. And so you wake up thinking you are free, while quietly repeating the patterns of people who never became what they dreamed of becoming. This is where transformation begins. Not with motivation, not with confidence, but with confrontation. The confrontation between who you are pretending to be and who you could become if you stop negotiating with your weakness. Because success is not just an external reward. It is not money, recognition, or status. Those are consequences. Success is a test of identity. And the question life is always asking you is brutally simple. Can you be trusted with more? More responsibility, more power, more influence, more opportunity, more abundance? Not everyone can. Because what you build externally will always reflect what you have mastered internally. And most people are not rejected by success. They are rejected by their own psychology before success even arrives. Look closely at your life and you will see the pattern. You say you want discipline, but you negotiate with comfort. You say you want greatness, but you tolerate inconsistency. You say you want a different future, but you repeat the same decisions that built your current reality. This is not failure. This is identity repetition, and Jung would call it the unconscious mind running the show. The hidden part of you that speaks through habits, impulses, avoidance, procrastination, and self-sabotage. The part of you that was shaped in childhood environments, social conditioning, fear-based learning, and emotional wounds you never fully processed. And until you face that shadow, you will keep calling your limitations personality. But listen carefully. You are not your personality. You are the awareness observing it. And awareness can evolve. That is where power begins. Because the moment you realize you are not fixed, you become dangerous to your old self. And your old self will resist. It will whisper, "You are not that kind of person. You never stick to things. You always fail at this point. You are not built for that life." But those are not truths. They are recordings. Old emotional echoes replaying themselves in the absence of conscious direction. And if you listen to them long enough, they become prophecy. But if you challenge them, something extraordinary happens. They begin to weaken, not because they disappear, but because you stop obeying them. This is where the transformation truly begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in refusing to remain someone unconscious. There is a reason ancient philosophies, modern psychology, and every system of self-mastery converge on the same principle. You cannot rise beyond the level of your inner order. A chaotic mind cannot sustain a disciplined life. A fragmented identity cannot hold a powerful future. And a person who is internally divided will always sabotage externally built success. This is why some people get close to success and then destroy it. They reach opportunity and then lose it. They touch progress and then retreat, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack integration. Inside them, one part wants growth, another part fears exposure, one part wants the discipline, another part worships comfort, one part dreams of expansion. Another part is loyal to old pain, and when these forces collide, The strongest unconscious pattern wins, always. Unless you become conscious enough to interrupt it. This interruption is what most people call awakening. But awakening is not mystical. It is psychological responsibility. It is the moment you stop saying, "This is just how I am," and start asking, "What part of me is driving this decision?" Because every decision you make is an expression of an inner authority. Either your higher self is leading or your conditioned self is reacting. There is no neutral state. And if you are honest, you will notice something uncomfortable. Most of your decisions are not made. They are triggered. Triggered by fear of failure. Triggered by desire for validation. Triggered by avoidance of discomfort. Triggered by the need for quick relief. And so your life becomes a reaction instead of a creation. But you were not designed to react. You were designed to build. To shape reality with intention instead of surviving it with impulse. And this is where the idea of becoming the person God can trust with success begins to take meaning. Because trust is not given to desire. Trust is given to discipline. If you were given everything you asked for today, would your current habits be able to sustain it? Would your mind remain stable under pressure? Would your ego remain humble under praise? Would your discipline remain intact under comfort? Most people never ask this question. They only ask for more. More money, more opportunity, more visibility. But they never question whether their current identity can carry it. And that is why life delays them. Not to punish them, but to prepare them. Because what you want without readiness becomes destruction. And what you want with readiness becomes destiny. Look at history. Thomas Edison did not become the symbol of innovation because he wanted success more than others. He became it because he endured failure without collapsing his identity. Thousands of failed experiments did not change his internal certainty. Henry Ford did not revolutionize industry because he avoided resistance. He studied it, absorbed it, and kept moving through it until the system had no choice but to adapt. Walt Disney built an empire not from constant inspiration, but from disciplined imagination anchored in repeated rejection. And in every case, the external achievement was only possible because the internal structure was stable enough to hold it. This is the secret most people miss. Success is not attracted by desire. It is sustained by identity stability. And identity stability is built through repetition of aligned action when no one is watching. Not intensity, not inspiration, repetition. You do not become strong in a single moment of courage. You become strong in thousands of moments where you did what you said you would do, even when you didn't feel like it. And slowly something shifts inside you. Your mind stops debating every action. Your energy stops leaking into doubt. Your identity starts to solidify. And for the first time, you are no longer negotiating with your potential. You are executing it. But before this state arrives, there is always resistance. Because the old version of you does not want to die quietly. It fights through distraction. It fights through excuses. It fights through emotional reasoning. It fights through overthinking. It fights through delay disguised as preparation. And if you are not aware of this, you will mistake resistance for reality. You will think, this is too hard, when in truth, it is just unfamiliar. And everything powerful is unfamiliar at first. Your mind was not built to seek truth. It was built to seek safety. And safety often lies. It tells you to stay where you are. It tells you to avoid risk. It tells you to choose comfort over growth. But nothing extraordinary was ever built inside the boundaries of comfort. And deep down, you already know this. That is why there is tension inside you. A quiet unrest that does not go away even when everything looks fine on the surface. That unrest is not confusion. It is potential demanding expression. It is the deeper self refusing to settle for a smaller life. And if you ignore it long enough, it turns into regret. But if you listen to it, it turns into transformation. And transformation always begins the same way, with the decision to stop betraying yourself in small ways. because greatness is not destroyed in dramatic failure. It is destroyed in small compromises repeated daily. The skipped discipline, the avoided responsibility, the postponed action, the ignored truth. Each one seems insignificant alone, but together they shape your identity more than any big decision ever will. So the question is no longer, what do you want to become? The real question is, what kind of person are you becoming through your daily choices? Because your future is not waiting for permission. It is being constructed silently. In every moment, you either align with your potential or abandon it. And if you are willing to face that honestly, then something inside you will begin to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. And once that shift begins, you will no longer be able to live unconsciously, because you will have seen too much truth to return to illusion. And that is where real becoming starts. And once you have seen that truth, you can no longer pretend you don't. Because ignorance is not a lack of information. It is a chosen comfort, a negotiated blindness, a willingness to stay asleep because awakening demands responsibility. And responsibility is what most people secretly fear more than failure. Failure is temporary, but responsibility is permanent. Once you accept it, there is no going back to the fantasy that someone else will save you, rescue you, or redirect your life for you. This is the moment where the philosophy of Jung becomes deeply personal, because he did not speak only about dreams or symbols. He spoke about integration, the integration of the shadow, the parts of you that you deny, suppress, or disguise in socially acceptable forms. The anger you refuse to admit becomes passive resistance. The fear you refuse to face becomes procrastination. The insecurity you refuse to acknowledge becomes constant comparison. And the desire you refuse to own becomes self-sabotage dressed as morality. Nothing disappears in the psyche. It only changes form. So when people say, "I don't know why I keep doing this," they are not describing mystery. They are describing unconscious authorship. A life being written by parts of the mind that have never been questioned. But the moment you begin to observe yourself without justification, something unusual happens. You begin to separate awareness from impulse. And in that separation, power is born. Because now you are no longer the reaction. You are the observer of the reaction, and the observer can choose. This is the beginning of freedom. But freedom is not comfortable. It is disorienting at first, because you lose the illusion of automatic identity. You can no longer say, "I just am like this," without feeling the dishonesty of it. You begin to see that every "I am like this" is actually "I have practiced this for a long time," and anything practiced can be unpracticed, but only through repetition. This is where most people misunderstand transformation. They think change is emotional, but real change is structural. It is not about how inspired you feel in a moment. It is about what structure you repeat when inspiration is gone, because inspiration is not rare. Discipline is. And discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you claim you want to become. But discipline is not punishment. It is alignment. It is the decision to no longer argue with your own direction. And once that alignment begins, something strange happens. Your life starts to simplify. Not externally at first, but internally. The noise reduces, the excuses weaken, the emotional chaos becomes less dominant. Because you are no longer feeding every thought with equal authority. You begin to rank your thoughts. You begin to question impulses. You begin to delay reaction long enough for awareness to intervene. And in that gap between impulse and action, your future is decided. Most people never live in that gap. They collapse it instantly. Thought becomes action without reflection. Emotion becomes decision without awareness. Fear becomes avoidance without challenge. And so life becomes accidental. But the awakened mind lives in that gap. It stretches it. It studies it. It learns to breathe inside it, and in doing so, it reclaims authorship. This is what it means to become dangerous to your old self. Not destructive, not chaotic, but ungovernable by unconscious patterns. Your old identity will resist this. It will try to pull you back into familiar cycles. It will offer you comfort disguised as logic. It will tell you that rest is more important than consistency. It will tell you that one day off does not matter. It will tell you that you deserve delay. And sometimes, it will even use spiritual language to justify stagnation. But beneath all of it, the mechanism is the same. Preserve the known self. Because the known self, even if limited, feels safe. And the unknown self, even if powerful, feels threatening. This is why transformation feels like tension. Because you are not just adding new habits. You are dissolving old identity structures. And identity does not dissolve quietly. It resists. It negotiates. It panics. It attempts to reassert control through distraction, doubt, and emotional instability. And if you are unaware of this, you will interpret resistance as a sign to stop. But if you are aware, you will interpret resistance as evidence that something inside you is actually changing. Because nothing resists what it already is, only what it is becoming. And that resistance is not your enemy. It is the final echo of an identity that is losing control. So instead of obeying it, you observe it. You continue anyway, not with aggression, not with emotional force, but with quiet, unshakable continuation. And continuation is what rewires the mind. Not intensity, not motivation, continuation. There is a moment where this repetition begins to compound. You wake up one day and notice something subtle. You are no longer negotiating with yourself as much. The decision to act is no longer a debate. It is a direction. And with that shift, time itself begins to feel different. Days become structured instead of scattered. Energy becomes directed instead of leaked. Attention becomes focused instead of fragmented. And slowly, you begin to experience something most people never experience in their entire lives. Internal coherence. The mind stops fighting itself. The body begins to follow intention. And identity begins to stabilize around discipline instead of desire. At this stage, success is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you embody. But even here, humility is required. Because success does not only test effort, it tests character. When things begin to improve, when recognition increases, when results start to appear, a new psychological danger emerges: ego inflation. The mind begins to believe it has arrived. It begins to loosen discipline under the illusion of mastery. It begins to replace consistency with confidence. And slowly, the same patterns that created success begin to erode it. This is why many people rise and fall repeatedly, not because they lack ability, but because they fail to remain internally aligned after external progress. So the real challenge is not becoming successful. It is remaining the type of person who can sustain success without losing integrity. And that requires something deeper than discipline. It requires awareness of power, because power without awareness becomes distortion, and awareness without discipline becomes stagnation. They must evolve together. This is what Jung hinted at when he spoke about individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not ideal, but whole. A person whose internal contradictions are no longer unconscious conflicts, but conscious integrations. A person who can feel fear without being controlled by it. Who can feel desire without being enslaved by it. Who can experience doubt without collapsing into it. This is not the absence of struggle. It is mastery of relationship with struggle. And in that mastery, something profound happens. You stop being divided. And a divided mind can never sustain a powerful life, because every external victory will be met with internal sabotage. But a unified mind becomes steady under pressure. It does not fracture under uncertainty. It does not collapse under delay. It does not abandon direction when emotion fluctuates. It continues, quietly, consistently, relentlessly, and that continuity becomes identity. At that point, success is no longer something outside of you. It becomes the natural expression of who you are when you are no longer contradicting yourself. And this is the deepest truth hidden inside every philosophy of growth, every story of greatness, every biography of transformation. The life you are trying to reach is not waiting ahead of you. It is waiting beneath your inconsistency. beneath your avoidance, beneath your unconscious habits. And the moment you stop abandoning yourself in small ways, that life begins to reveal itself, not as reward, but as consequence, a natural unfolding of alignment. And once you experience even a glimpse of that alignment, you understand something irreversible. You were never stuck. You were simply split. And now the work is no longer about becoming someone else. It is about becoming whole enough to no longer block what is already trying to emerge through you. And when you stop blocking what is already trying to emerge through you, something unsettling begins to happen. Life stops feeling like a constant negotiation and starts feeling like a direct consequence of your inner state. There is no longer a need to force meaning onto everything. Meaning begins to reveal itself through action. And in that phase, you realize something most people never confront honestly. You were never waiting on motivation. You were waiting on self-respect strong enough to override comfort. Because motivation comes and goes like weather. But self-respect is structural. It decides what you will tolerate from yourself when no one is watching. And that tolerance level is the invisible ceiling of your life. Raise your standards internally, and your life has no choice but to reorganize itself around that standard. But keep tolerating inconsistency, and no external opportunity can save you from internal collapse. This is why some people can be given the same opportunity and produce entirely different outcomes. It is not the opportunity that determines destiny. It is the identity receiving it. And identity is built in private. In the moments where you could quit but don't, where you could delay but act, where you could lie to yourself but choose honesty instead. These are not dramatic moments, they are quiet decisions, but they accumulate into destiny. Carl Jung would say the psyche is not transformed by grand declarations, but by sustained confrontation with truth. And truth, at its deepest level, is not always comforting. It does not always validate your current self-image. It often challenges it. It asks, why do you keep repeating what you already know is breaking you? Why do you keep choosing temporary relief over long-term alignment? Why do you keep negotiating with patterns you already understand are limiting you? And when a person finally stops avoiding these questions, something rare emerges. Self-authority. Not confidence, not arrogance, but authority over the internal dialogue. The ability to no longer be manipulated by every passing thought. Because most people are not thinking. They are being thought through. A stream of mental noise constantly interpreting reality, rarely questioning itself. But the moment you begin to observe that stream without immediately obeying it, you create distance. And in that distance, intelligence awakens. You begin to notice that not every thought deserves action. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every impulse deserves permission. And that realization alone begins to reorganize your life. Because previously you were reactive. Now you are selective. And selection is power. But selection requires discomfort. Because it means denying parts of yourself that used to have full control. The part that wants ease. The part that wants escape. The part that wants immediate reward. These parts do not disappear. They simply lose authority. And when they lose authority, they protest. They create resistance in the form of doubt, fatigue, procrastination, and emotional noise. And if you misunderstand this, you will think something is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong. You are simply restructuring your internal hierarchy. And every restructuring feels like instability before it becomes strength. This is why discipline is not a personality trait. It is a psychological reorganization process. You are literally teaching your mind a new order of priorities through repetition. And repetition is more powerful than intention. Intention says, I want to change. Repetition says, this is who I am now. And identity always follows repetition, not desire. So, the question becomes simple, but not easy. What are you repeating when no one is applauding you? What are you reinforcing when there is no external pressure? What are you allowing to define you in private moments? Because that is where your real life is being decided. Not in public, not in announcements, but in silence. And silence does not lie. It reveals. It strips away performance. It exposes patterns. It shows whether your future is being built or postponed. And at a certain point, if you stay honest long enough, you begin to feel something deeper than ambition. You begin to feel responsibility toward your own potential. Not pressure from the outside world, but obligation from within. As if a version of you that already exists in possibility is waiting for you to become stable enough to carry it. And that feeling changes everything. Because now, discipline is no longer punishment. It is respect. Respect for the life you claim to want. Respect for the identity you are becoming. Respect for the future that is silently forming through your present actions. And when respect becomes stronger than comfort, transformation becomes irreversible. Not because life becomes easy, but because excuses stop feeling acceptable. There is a moment in every transformation where you realize you can still go back, but you no longer belong there. The old habits still exist. The old patterns still call. The old identity still tries to negotiate. But something in you no longer resonates with it, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You have seen too much. You understand too much. And ignorance is no longer available as comfort. So you continue forward, not because you are forced, but because you are aligned. And alignment eventually produces a different kind of strength. A quiet strength, a stable strength, a strength that does not need emotional intensity to function. A strength that remains intact even when motivation disappears. This is where people around you may begin to notice something they cannot fully explain. You have not become louder. You have become steadier. You have not become more chaotic. You have become more precise. You have not become more reactive. You have become more deliberate. And in that deliberateness, life begins to respond differently to you. Opportunities start to align more naturally. Decisions feel less fragmented. Direction becomes clearer. Not because the world changed first, but because you did. And that is the hidden law of transformation. The external world reorganizes itself around internal consistency. So when you become consistent internally, reality has no choice but to adjust. But consistency is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is not something people celebrate in the moment. It is almost invisible while it is happening, but its results are undeniable over time. And that is why most people never fully respect it at first. They underestimate repetition because it looks too simple. But simplicity is not weakness, it is power without noise. And the most powerful transformations are always quiet at the beginning. Because they are happening in identity, not performance, and identity is slow to change, but impossible to ignore once it does. So the final question is not about what you want. It is about what you are willing to become consistent with. Because consistency is not something you do. It is something you embody. And once embodied, it no longer feels like effort. It feels like truth. And truth, once lived, does not need explanation. It only needs continuation.